In the dim light of night, John, a cautious homeowner, saw hooded figures crawling around his property with mysterious intentions. With a pounding heart, he watched as they moved stealthily toward a fate that instilled dread in him. Grabbing the phone, he knew he had no choice but to call the police. When John whispered his address to the switchboard, he was overcome with a chilling sensation that left him paralyzed with fear. John was looking out the window now and saw strangers in the distance. His property was quite large, and honestly, he couldn't even see it all from outside his house. If these people had wanted to cross without being seen, they could have easily succeeded. It seemed like they had no problem being seen, which was very strange to John. Under the law, he now had every right to shoot these people on the spot for trespassing. They were lucky that I had no intention of doing so, but he still didn't want a complete stranger on his property. Who knows if they intended to enter his house, where only he and his defenseless daughter were? John was very stressed. With his eyes still fixed on the people crossing his property, John decided to call the police. He needed help, and they were the only option he could think of. He explained his situation to the officer answering the phone, but he had the feeling that the man did not take him entirely seriously. He was trying to downplay the matter. The officer confirmed that those people were breaking the law, but at the time, he didn't have enough officers to go and evict or even arrest nearly 10 people. And on top of that, John didn't exactly live nearby either. He had a house with a very large piece of land near the mountains, mainly because he wanted to get away from other people. And now that decision was starting to work against John by the looks of it. No one was willing to come here to help him, so he had to figure this out on his own. Not knowing what to do next, John began to speculate about what people might be doing here. They had to know that they were on forbidden ground. His entire property was enclosed by a large fence. They must have cut it or climbed over the fence. Not even 2 days ago he had patrolled the boundaries of his land, and then everything was almost in perfect condition. So seeing that they came here for a purpose, John's only hope was that that purpose was to cross his land, and that they would be out of his sight within an hour or so. But unfortunately, that was not the case. At least, not yet, as the group of people apparently had all the time in the world. They sat in the middle of their property and in full view of the whole house. John couldn't understand exactly what they were doing, but what was clear was that they weren't leaving any time soon. And this is the point at which John's paranoia begins to take hold of him. He began to convince himself more and more that they were about to enter the house with bad intentions. Perhaps they wore strange costumes to hide their appearance and avoid being recognized. They were in the middle of nowhere, and he and his daughter were an easy target. And with that in mind, John began to make preparations. He made sure that all the entrances to his house were blocked, and even started to board up some of the windows or push as close to them as possible. He didn't take any chances, but even with his semi-secure home, John still wanted these people on his property more than anything, and he was willing to do everything possible to achieve it. He didn't intend to shoot those people, but John had a gun at home. One that he only thought to use in the most extreme circumstances, and, in his mind, this was one of those circumstances. These people couldn't know what he was willing to do and not do. So maybe, if they knew he had a gun, they would flee his property immediately. He went to a second-floor window from where he could see the intruders. They were still sitting on John's ground, not caring about anything, and that made him very angry. He took a deep breath, pointed his gun at the sky, and fired a bullet. The sound of the gunshot echoed miles away, and people on the ground reacted immediately. It is evident that the loud noise shook them. But they did not flee, as Juan had hoped. His attention was now fully on the house, and John was horrified to see them moving in his direction. They were covering their faces, which in John's mind could only mean bad things. He began to panic. He felt that his only option was to take his daughter, get in his car, and flee as far away from here as possible. But that would mean leaving their home, leaving his safe haven, the place he had spent so much time building. This was all he had, and leaving it behind out of fear seemed to him the greatest surrender in the world. But he was not alone in the decision either. His daughter Samantha would also be very involved in what he ended up deciding. She deserved to have an opinion. Until now, he had basically locked her in her room with the instruction to just play and not worry, which she had no problem doing, of course. But when he saw his father's expression, he knew things were very serious. Of course, she had seen the hooded men first, but she didn't think much of it. And when he found out that they were coming here now, his first instinct was not to be afraid, but simply to ask them what they wanted, something that John considered a very bad idea. Who knows what those people were capable of? And to come face to face with them. It was the last thing he wanted. But Samantha suggested that she could ask them from the window. What could they do if he was up there? John immediately thought of the fact that if he had a gun, they too could easily carry it, and now had a possible incentive to use it. In fact, he was surprised that Samantha hadn't said anything yet about the shooting. But the less she knew about it, the better. She probably didn't even know he had a gun on the property, with how strongly she opposed it. But that is why he did not have a good argument to follow his daughter's advice either. His heart almost jumped out of his chest as he headed back to the upstairs window. He still had the gun in his pocket to be safe, hidden so that Samantha wouldn't see her, because, of course, she wanted to accompany him. He had a smile on his face, and his optimism was noticeable. John took a deep breath and poked his head out of the window. But, to his surprise, he didn't see people anymore. Still stunned by the initial shock, John's eyes immediately fixed on the discarded robes a few steps from the entrance of the house. The loose cloth seemed to flutter eerily in the gentle breeze, hinting at a hasty departure. Why would anyone leave their robe here? John pondered aloud, anxiety pounding his voice as he considered the implications of these abandoned garments. Approaching the window, he meticulously examined the surroundings, every tree, every shadow, every conceivable hiding place. The moonlight provided dim illumination, casting eerie silhouettes on the ground. Despite this, there was no trace of the hooded figures. "They can't have gone very far," he whispered to himself, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on him. His gaze was fixed on the dense canopy of the trees that led to the nearby forest. It stood tall, seeming to swallow all the light, and now, possibly, the mysterious strangers. Panic began to bubble up inside him, tightening with each passing second. Could they be in the woods? Watching? Waiting? He reflected, and the mere thought sent a shiver down his spine. Doubt gnawed at him. It was becoming increasingly difficult for him to dismiss the idea that strangers could have slipped away and entered the house. Every shadow in the hallway, every creak of the wooden floors seemed to mock him with that possibility. What if they are already inside, hiding, watching us? John watched, feeling his heart rate quicken. "Sam, listen to me," John implored, his voice firm and soft at the same time. "Go to your room and close the door." I could see the confusion and growing fear in his eyes, but there was no time for explanations. Quickly accompanying her inside, he repeated, "Stay inside, whatever you hear." The gravity of the situation caused Samantha to nod and close the door behind her. The weight of the pistol in his pocket now seemed greater. He hesitated, considering whether to give it to Samantha. It would give her a chance to defend herself, but he might be left vulnerable. After a long and tense deliberation, he decided to keep her close, praying that the decision would not turn against him. The oppressive silence of the house was interrupted only by John's breathing and heartbeat. He pressed his ear against the walls and doors, trying to catch any sound, any hint. The creak of a floorboard, muffled whispers, anything that could alert you to the presence of an intruder. Every second that passed increased the tension in his shoulders, and his senses sharpened to an almost painful point. John couldn't help but feel like a stranger in his own home. The walls, the decoration, the memories, everything seemed shrouded in a haze of suspicion. Every nook and cranny and shadow seemed to hide potential threats, transforming the familiar into the unknown. It felt like I was traversing a strange landscape, every step fraught with uncertainty. Methodically, John moved from room to room, pistol clutched tightly in his hand. He examined closets, peeked behind curtains, and even looked under beds. The silence continued to mock him, but when he left the last bedroom, he felt relief. "The floor above is clear," he whispered to himself, realizing that this was a brief respite before thinking about the floors below. Taking a deep breath, John steadies himself at the top of the stairs. His thoughts about Samantha and the need to protect her fuel his determination. "One step at a time," he mutters to himself, trying to control the restlessness that threatens to consume him. The descent begins, each rung resonating like a cacophony of doubt and determination. But John is determined. At the foot of the stairs, a thick blanket of shadows awaits. Even the familiar scent of wooden floors now seems ominous. Every nook and cranny seems like a nest of potential dangers. Trusting his instincts, John navigates cautiously, pistol raised, shadows seeming to dance menacingly around him. The living room, the study, the kitchen. All spaces are devoid of unexpected occupants. However, each empty room John finds, paradoxically, increases his tension. "Why does he feel so bad?" he asks, forcing himself to continue the search. With each room clear, hope fights against fear, without either side being able to impose itself definitively. Though logic dictates that he's alone, an unsettling feeling corrodes John's psyche. The hair on the back of his neck stands up, and a shiver runs down his spine. A persistent thought repeats itself over and over again. "They're watching you." He circles around frequently, looking for invisible eyes, but the eerie silence only intensifies the paranoia. After completing his internal examination, John momentarily hesitates at the back door. The darkness of the night offers him no consolation. However, he recognizes the urgency of expanding his search abroad. With renewed determination, he opens the door and lets the cool night air envelop him. It's time to face what's lurking out there, he resolves, delving into the unknown. The darkness outside is overwhelming, almost palpable. As John's eyes struggle to adjust, every whisper of leaves and wind adds to his anxiety. "Stay alert," he reminds himself mentally, taking careful steps on the wet ground. The silent night feels both serene and foreboding, and each sound amplifies John's heartbeat in his own ears. He approaches the robes again and leans over to examine them in more detail. Their fine texture and peculiar embroidery suggest that they are not ordinary garments. Who would leave such intricately designed robes behind? John wonders, with the weight of the enigma deepening. He is dragged into a whirlwind of thoughts, trying to decipher the narrative behind the abandoned clothes. As he rises, John notices a subtle footprint in the grass. A footstep, perhaps? He begins to cautiously follow the series of faint markings, hoping that they will shed light on the stranger's path. Every footprint, every altered branch, becomes a breadcrumb in this mysterious trail, guiding John toward what he hopes will be an answer. The tracks lead you to the edge of the forest. The dense canopy of the trees casts an even deeper shadow, hiding what might be lurking inside. John hesitates, debating whether he should venture inside. Memories of old stories about the forest, full of secrets and spirits, surface in his mind, making his decision even more daunting. As she returns to the robe for the last time, John's hand brushes something hard under it. Curiously, he lifts the garment, revealing a small, ornate box, locked. Their presence raises even more questions. What secrets does it hide? John ponders as he carefully picks up the box, feeling its weight and the gravity of the enigma it might unravel. When John's gaze wanders from the box to the ground, he is surprised to see a metal ring, partially covered by dirt and foliage. He tugs at it, revealing a hidden hatch he didn't know existed. How long has this been here? And how have I not noticed? He thinks, bewildered. The same ground he has walked on for years now seems to him uncharted territory. Removing the dirt, John examines the surface of the hatch. Its aged appearance suggests that it has been there for decades. The idea that a labyrinth or a hidden chamber is hidden under his property fills him with fear and amazement at the same time. The weathered metal of the trap door, mute testimony to its antiquity, offers no clue as to its origin or purpose. He's about to make a major discovery, but the house upstairs continues to demand his attention. What if strangers emerge while I'm downstairs? Would Samantha be safe? John reflects, torn apart. The weight of responsibility weighs on him, with the two challenges of the house above and the secrets below competing for priority. Despite the risks, the hatch's charm is irresistible. The desire to unravel its mysteries grows exponentially. The box he carries in his hand serves as a tangible link to this new enigma. Driven by a mixture of courage and curiosity, John makes the momentous decision to descend. When he gently lifts the trap door, the stale air below brushes his face, carrying whispers of old stories and forgotten times. The narrow staircase, which descends into an abyss, is shaping up to be an invitation and a challenge. John inhales deeply, summoning all his courage, and with the ornate box gripped tightly, he takes his first step into the uncharted darkness. The further down John goes, the more distant the world above feels. The ambient light becomes dimmer, and the freshness of the subsoil envelops it. Each step resonates in the confines of the tunnel, blending with the rhythmic beat of his heart. The weight of the earth and the humidity of the air intensify the severity of its descent. The spiral staircase ends up leading to a narrow corridor. At the end, an old wooden door stands as the guardian of another mystery. John stops and presses his ear against her. The slightest of murmurs, soft chatter, seeps through the time-worn wood, suggesting that you're not alone in this underground world. A battle is raging in John's mind. Fear advises him to back down, while curiosity drives him to keep going. He grips the gun tightly, the cold metal of which reminds him of the potential danger that awaits him. Breathing calmly, John moves into position, ready to face whatever awaits him behind the door, his nerves running high. Summoning all his courage, John pushes open the door slowly. A loud crack gives away its arrival. When it opens, the dim light of a torch illuminates the chamber, casting long, dancing shadows. With the gun raised, John goes inside, his eyes bulging, trying to understand the room and its occupants. There they are, the hooded figures, standing around an intricately carved stone table. Their attention is focused on a bright object located in the center. Their robes sway slightly, but their faces remain hidden. They don't seem startled by John's entrance. Rather, they almost seem to have expected it. Their actions and motives remain an enigma, but it is clear that the story is far from over. When the hooded figures begin to converse, John sharpens his ears in hopes of understanding something. But his words, fluid and melodic, are strange and indecipherable. His tone, however, suggests caution rather than hostility. The inability to communicate increases their sense of vulnerability and confusion in this unfamiliar world. From the group, a figure with a slightly different tunic design steps forward. In a soft voice, he begins to speak in John's language, albeit with a noticeable accent. "Peace, stranger. We don't want to hurt you," the figure begins. John's tension eases slightly, and gratitude for the bridge of communication becomes evident in his eyes. The translator introduces himself as Elion and begins to narrate his story. "This underground," Elion begins, "it has been a sanctuary for our people for generations." John listens intently, absorbing every word. Elion paints a vivid portrait of its history, highlighting the importance of refuge for those fleeing persecution and danger. John learns that long before he bought the property, this underground network served as a checkpoint for refugees. Elion explains, "We are not the first, nor will we be the last. This passageway is a beacon of hope, a lifeline for those desperate to escape and start over." John realizes the weight of the tunnel's legacy, whose walls bear mute witness to countless stories of hope and despair. As Elion shares stories of families, elders, and children who have gone through this passage, John's heart swells with a mix of emotions. Endurance, determination, and the relentless search for a better life move John deeply. Feel a deep connection to these strangers, realizing the shared human experience that transcends language and culture. At this revelation, John remains in silent contemplation. Their property, a symbol of personal achievement and solitude, had a dual identity, offering salvation to countless souls. He is humbled by his legacy, understanding now that the earth beneath his feet has whispered stories of hope to desperate ears long before his time. This lighthouse, now under his tutelage, bore the weight of numerous dreams and silent prayers. Empathy boils in John's heart, but it's intertwined with practical concerns. He sympathizes with strangers, but also recognizes the potential risks to himself and Samantha. The perspective of the law may not be as kind or understanding. He struggles with his moral compass. He wants to help, but he is also aware of the possible consequences. In an effort to protect both sides, John proposes a plan. They can stay until dawn, he suggests cautiously. Afterwards, I would advise them to keep going. He offers them provisions from his house, hoping that it will make their journey easier. Elion nods understandingly, appreciating the delicacy of John's position and the gesture of goodwill. Dawn is approaching, and strangers are gathering their belongings. The air is charged with emotion as John watches them prepare. He recognizes the resistance in their eyes and understands the immensity of their aspirations. Quiet determination, glimmers of hope, and dreams of a safe haven resonate deeply with him. Once they're gone, John stands by the open hatch, contemplating his role in countless escapes to freedom. He decides that while he respects his legacy, he must protect his family and their secrets. With a heavy heart, he retrieves tools and materials and gets to work sealing the entrance, making sure that the history it houses remains intact. By perusing an old map, John realizes the strategic location of his property. It stands on the cusp of two nations, a thin line that separates familiar territory from the land of aspirations. The position of the house, so close to the border, had inadvertently made it a beacon for those seeking refuge. This geographical advantage had given countless souls a glimmer of hope, while John had remained blissfully unaware of its importance. When the hooded figures disappear beyond the horizon, they leave with an understanding. Whispered between them, the message spreads quickly, passing from one person to another, like wildfire. The shrine under John's house, once a lighthouse, was no longer an option. He had been discovered and sealed, and his promise had become a fragment of history that was secretly shared around the bonfires. After the strangers leave, the house is left in an eerie silence. John paces back and forth, struggling with a torrent of emotions. Although he understands the desperation of strangers, he is also overwhelmed by the gravity of what happened. Unknowingly, he has been involved in a secret operation, and now it is up to him to act responsibly. With a loud sigh, John calls the local police, his voice slightly trembling. It details the strange events that occurred, highlighting the discovery of the underground tunnel. Although he omits details of the stranger's brief stay, he makes sure to provide enough information for authorities to investigate. At the end of the call, he finds himself with a deep sense of vulnerability, anticipating his response. As patrol cars approach his property, John contemplates the importance of his home. It was once his personal refuge, a place of solitude and safety. But their story had been intertwined with countless lives, aspirations, and dreams. The earth, mute witness to these crossings, was now embarking on a new chapter, just like John, forever altered by the intersections of fate. With each passing day, the authorities deepen the mystery that hides under John's house. Their findings paint a poignant picture. The hooded figures were not simple intruders, but undocumented immigrants. Driven by stories of an underground shelter, these individuals had ventured out in search of better prospects. Their journey had been based on hope, dreams, and the promise of refuge. The clandestine system was not recent. Its beginnings date back decades, the work of a network of smugglers. Their motivation, according to the evidence gathered, was not mere profit, but a genuine desire to provide safe passage for those seeking a better future. This altruistic enterprise had quietly prospered, right under John's nose, until its recent discovery disturbed its legacy. Sitting on his porch, John is introspective. His once modest piece of land had been a vessel of dreams, a silent participant in the clandestine dance of fates. Imagine the countless souls who have passed through there, each with a unique story, aspiration, and hope. He realizes that his property was not just a piece of land, but a repository of dreams.